Everyone. This week's parsha starts off with Yaakov approaching Esav. And as he's approaching Esav, he sends message to Esav and he says that Im Lavan Garti, that I've lived with Lavan. And Rashi points out that he was communicating with Esav two separate things. Number one, he was teaching him, or he was telling him, that even though that I received the brachas from our father Yitzchak, but the brachas were never fulfilled. Im Lavan Garti, I was like a ger, a sojourner, a stranger. I wasn't very popular. Didn't make a lot of money over there. The brachas didn't come true. But then Yaakov tells him one more thing. He tells him, Taryag mitzvahs shamarti, that I kept the 613 mitzvahs. And the commentaries try to understand what is the connection between these two messages. Number one, he's telling them that I wasn't so successful. The brachas didn't seem to come true. But number two, I kept the 613 mitzvahs. And one of the explanations that's given is that Yaakov wanted to tell Esav that both you and I know that the success of Yitzchak's brachas are dependent on the 613 mitzvahs. It's dependent on not only the survival, but the thriving of a Jew keeping to the 613 mitzvahs. And therefore he was simply re-emphasizing, my father's brachas didn't come true, even though I kept the 613 mitzvahs, even though I kept the cause that would bring about the bracha and the blessing, my father's brachas did not come true. We're very fortunate this evening to have Rabbi Teller with us tonight, not talking about necessarily the physical survival of the Jewish people, but the spiritual survival which we've had to battle throughout the generations, and specifically focusing on a very specific generation. Without further ado, I'd like to call up Rabbi Teller. Careful the wire.
Thank you very much. I don't get to Modin very often, actually, once a year when I'm invited to speak here. But this was a nice switch because it got me into the Channuka mood. Driving here, I saw you're also called Maccabee Nerut, and the road I came on and got lost on is called Chashmonaim. So I can't do much better than that. So thank you so much. I should have had Rechov Safganiyot, and I would have known that I'm here. Okay, so we're going back. Well, let me go back to, I don't know if you ever heard of the name of Chaim Shmulevitz. Chaim Shmulevitz was the sainted Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir Yeshiva, giant of giants. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein said about him, he carried the whole world on his shoulders. So years ago, when I say years ago, I'm guessing a little over 60 years ago, maybe between 60 and 70 years ago, one of his daughters got married. There was a Sheva Brachot in the yeshiva. He lived in the yeshiva. And there were many very prominent rabbis, scholars, Rosh Yeshiva. Chaim Shmulevitz makes a simcha. Everyone came. And the men were gathering around, and Rabbi Chatzkel Sarna, the Rosh Yeshiva of Chevron Yeshiva, a man known obviously for his scholarship, but also well known for his very dry, sometimes even acerbic sense of humor. He asked these scholars, who was the greatest Torah scholar in the last 100 years? And they're sort of scratching their head and rubbing their beards. And this scholar never opened up a Blat Gemara, never opened up a page of Talmud. And they said, Chatzkel, this is not funny. I said, think about it. Now to our story. We're talking about Galicia. Galicia, does anybody know where Galicia is? I'm hearing noise, I'm not sure.
Depends on what the political wind is blowing. Did you mean in Spain or in Poland? Poland.
Is there really one in Spain? Really? What's that? See, I learned something already. Okay, there's Galicia, which was very Jewishly inhabited, was eastern Poland, Ukraine, and it was a bedrock of the Hasidic movement. And we're talking prior to World War I, 5 years, let's say, before World War I, very Hasidic and ensconced. And Erev Yom Tov, if you're familiar, Hasidim traditionally go to the Rebbe for Yom Tov. When there's a holiday, go to the Rebbe. I'll tell you an interesting story. I just thought of it now. I don't know how many years ago this was, probably 20 years ago. Ger headquarters in Yerushalayim. Ger is probably the largest Hasidus in Israel, I'm guessing, maybe in the world. So their headquarters in Yerushalayim now is on Rehov Bar Ilan. It used to be on Rehov Malchi Yisrael. And it was Erev Shavuot, and I'm walking down Rehov Malchi Yisrael, and bus after bus. There must be 150 buses that come from Chatzor, from Ashdod, from all over. The fathers and their sons to be with the Rebbe. I'm walking down Rehov Malchi Yisrael, and you see bus after bus of Hasidim wearing. Now, Ger, they don't wear Streimlach. They wear, you know, those brushes in the car wash. They were spuddocks. So you saw thousands of them coming. So there were some non-religious people on the side of the street. They said, "Makara, Mashiach higia?" Is a Mashiach here? All these people coming out of nowhere. So Hasidim go to the Rebbe for Yom Tov, the men that is, and the women and the children and the daughters stay home. So what happened was, Erev Yom Tov, the fathers and the sons, they're going to the Rebbe. Meanwhile, the mothers left home with the daughters. The daughters have gone to Polish public school, and they are enthralled with Polish society. The boys that are going to the Rebbe, there's a gleam in their eye, there's a sparkle. The girls, again, they're in Polish public school, and they're enthralled with Polish society. Beats me. They're intrigued by Polish novels. Beats me. And because of the Treaty of Minorities after World War I, they did have Jewish classes in Polish public school, but they were taught by Apikoursim. They were taught by people who had a strong grudge against Judaism and certainly against God. So the girls their minds were being poisoned. And so you had these scenes at the table where the boys were wearing langa rekalach, long coats, bulletproof stockings, hat large enough to be a manhole. And the girls were not dressed modestly. And they brazenly spoke to their parents who addressed them in Yiddish, and they replied in Polish. And there was a lot of tension in the family. Our heroine, whose name I'm not going to reveal, because like any good storyteller, which I aspire to be, I want to create some pathos and drama. She's a dressmaker. And there's a metaphor from her profession which is jumping right up at her. And that is, there's a rip in the fabric of the Jewish people. Unless it's repaired immediately, will become irreparable. And then World War I breaks out. She's a member, her family are devout Belzer Hasidim, and they flee to the west. I think they flee to Austria. Is that true? I think so. They flee to the west. There are tens of thousands of Jewish refugees and plenty of Hasidim that flee to Vienna. Vienna is going to become a city with over 100,000 Jewish refugees after World War I, well over 100,000. And there they go from alley to alley without a roof over their head. They finally find a dank apartment in the 17th Bezirk, the 17th district. I can show off a little bit. I was born in Vienna. So the Jewish area of Vienna is the 2nd Bezirk, the 2nd district today. When I was a little kid, I'm already 43, but when I was a kid, thank you for laughing. When I was a little kid, someone told me that in the 2nd Bezirk on a Friday evening, men going to show, you saw an ocean of black, like that the scene I described to you on Rehov Malchi Yisrael, Erev Shavuot. You saw an ocean of black. All that has been destroyed. So they find a dank apartment in the 17th district. Now our heroine is determined she's going to go to shul on Shabbat like she always goes to shul. That was not any Shabbat. Here's one of our first connections. It was Shabbat Hanoch. And of all unlikely people, now we're talking Vienna, where there are snowdrifts tall enough to bury a fire engine. And the freezing cobblestone alleyways can turn down your mental gray area. You can barely think. But she's determined she's going to walking from the 17th Bezirk to the 1st Bezirk, to the 1st district, That's a walk over an hour in this freezing, cold, frigid weather. And of all unlikely people, her Catholic landlord informs her that right there in the 17th Bezirk is a religious synagogue. She's so excited. She walks to Shul on Shabbat, which is right there in the hood, and it's Shabbat Chanukah. Everything's going well. And then the rabbi gets up to speak and shows, oh, who is this imposter? Because in Galicia, where she lived among all the Hasidim, the rabbis had long coats, bulletproof stockings, hats that are enormous. And here's a rabbi with a brushed fedora, a short jacket, and a goatee. Not a bushy, untrimmed beard. Who is this imposter? No, they say. He's one of us. His name is Rabbi Dr. Moshe Flesh, a disciple of Rabbi Shamshin Raphael Hirsch. And he gets up to speak, and he says, everyone here can be Yehudit, the heroine of the Chanukah story. Now, I don't know, although I have my suspicions, have any of you ever heard a fire and brimstone sermon? It's not sounding like it. Yes, you have? Probably. No, you'd remember it if you heard it. I actually heard one. It wasn't in a Jewish atmosphere. It's such a funny story. I was one of my flights to Israel from America. I used to be a very devoted El Al passenger. And then when El Al got privatized, I felt I don't have to give my loyalty to El Al because it's a private company that no longer belongs to the country. So I started flying Delta. Now, what are the odds you're going to sit next to a pastor on a flight to the Holy Land on Delta Airlines? And the answers are not insignificant. I've done it many times. What?
And getting higher and higher.
Getting higher and higher, yeah. So, we like the evangelicals. They're good for Israel. So I was sitting next to, I don't have to go through this whole story, but this guy is sitting next to me. Of course, he tried to convert me the whole flight. And the joke was the next day I was a tour guide for his church at Yad Vashem. But we got really, really very friendly. And so he sends me his sermons, and he gives fire and brimstone sermons. He scares the living daylights out of them. So in a fire and brimstone sermon, the preacher says, the rabbi, you're going to burn, you're going to burn, you're going to burn, you're going to burn, you're going to burn. Now, he doesn't say who he's talking about, but everyone knows. And when he finishes, the person that he's talking about says, Rabbi, good talk. They really need to hear this. So what's the point? But the great people means you and you and you and you and you and you, realize that he or she, whenever my wife was expecting, we always called the baby Heshi. We didn't know if it would be a he or she. So the great people realize that Heshi is talking to me. So in the audience, he is thundering about Yehudit, the heroine of Chanukah, who saved the Jewish people. And he says, everyone here can be Yehudit. And she realizes he's talking to me. And he's talking to the girls of Krakow. He's talking to the girls of Galicia. He's talking to the girls of Poland. He's talking to the girls across the world. And something goes on in her head. And she attends every single talk that Rabbi Dr. Moshe Flesh delivers. And after Shabbat, she takes copious notes of what she remembers. And although she was innately an extremely modest woman, she was very important to her that she present her notes to Rabbi Flesh to make sure that they were accurate. Why was she so concerned? I'm hearing something.
Because she wants to teach it.
She wants to teach it. And more so, she also wants to make sure that it's accurate. A chain is as strong as the weakest link. And if you get the tradition wrong, the Masorah wrong, then you distort. There was a space mission to Mars. This is pretty famous. I don't know, I'm guessing 17, 18 years ago. And it missed. How do you miss Mars? It's 3 times larger than Earth. Maybe it's 10 times larger. How do you miss? But it was off just a teeny bit at liftoff. And you're off, and you can miss Mars. He looks at her notes, and he's amazed at Gaga Twitter Slackshot. Whoa, like a stenographer. She hasn't missed a word. And then she asks him, what must I read? He tells her he must read the books of Rabbi Shamshafal Hirsch, of Marcus Lehman, Hanoch And the catch was, she didn't have money. So she forgoed, is that correct English? Forwent? Which one, forwent? She forwent her lunch, and she saved those groschen to buy the books, which she mastered. And then World War I is over. I'm absolutely telescopically condensing. And she returns back to Krakow, Galicia, and she puts up a sign. She's a dressmaker. Again, I'm still not revealing her name to create the full tension. I don't want you to fall off the chair too quickly. And she puts up a sign on her dressmaker shop that in honor of Channuka, at the same time of year, she's going to have a sale. And the mothers and the daughters come into the shop, and they're clucking away, examining how the skirt fits and how the blouse fits and how the dress falls. And she is appalled. They may be the haute couture, but inside they're spiritual tatters. And she's even more determined than before to try and teach, as Rabbi Dr. Moshe Flesch said, to be Yehudit and teach the girls of Galicia. Now she's a Belzer Chasidista. If you've ever noticed, Hasidim are not so accustomed for girls learning Torah and girls learning. There's a story that a man was in Meir Sharim, and a woman walked by. She was a Gera Chasidista. And 2 blocks later, her husband walked by, and the guy said, I just saw your wife 2 blocks ago. He said, I know. We're taking a walk together. That's just an analogy. For Hasidim, for a girl to study is like not uphill, it's 180 degrees, straight up. So she has this ambitious plan to teach, but this is something radical. Because you could have asked me a very obvious question. If the boys who have this gleam in their eye, and they go to yeshiva, why don't you do the same thing for girls? And the answer is, it was simply not on the radar for Hasidim in Galicia that girls will study Torah. Not something that's done. And it's right before their eyes, but it's never occurred to them. And she has what seems to us an obvious plan. Let's create a school, maybe even a network for girls to study. And her brother thinks she's must have hit a rock, and her head hit a rock in Vienna, and she's off her rocker. And he tries to dissuade her, but he can't. So he knows the ultimate. She's a Belzer Chasidista. He'll take her before the Belzer Rebbe. Now the way it works is like this. Before you go before a Rebbe, you write out your request on a piece of paper, which is called a kvittel, or in Hebrew a petek, or a tzettel, good. We got all the words here, good. Or a scrap of paper. You write it out, and you present it to the Rebbe. Now the Belzer Rebbe was famous for his brevity. You ask him an important question, he'll say, or if it was life and death, he might say, yeah, or name. So she presents this thing. Now her brother, the whole time is trying to dissuade her. He says, I don't want to say give away her name, but he says to his sister, come on. Why waste the Rebbe's time? He's got important things to do. Why waste his time over this absolute moronic, imbecilic, idiotic narishkeit on stilts? And she's determined. And she writes a whole long zettel, a whole long kvittel. She presents it to the Rebbe, and her brother's waiting any second for the Rebbe to throw them out on their ear. And he finishes reading it, and he says, enthusiastically, Hatzlucha ubrucha, success and blessings. For a man who's spoken telegrams, this is a 300-page essay. So she has now the approval of the Belzer Rebbe. The next stop is the most important person for Chinuch, for education for women, Chinuch, for education for Jews in Poland, and that was? No. That was the Ger Rebbe. Now she travels to the Ger Rebbe, And the Ger Rebbe's sister lives in Krakow. And she tells her brother, you have to endorse what this woman is doing. She's going to save our people. So he writes a letter, a very, very important, pivotal figure in Polish Jewry. When the Chafetz Chaim, honest and true, we've all heard of the Chafetz Chaim? That wasn't the enthusiastic answer I was looking for. Okay, the Chafetz Chaim was a saintly scholar who sort of took out of the crypt the sin of speaking Lashon Hara, of not gossiping, and you name it, any saintly thing, he was at the forefront. He was in Radin, a town we would never, ever have heard of, had it not been for the Chafetz Chaim. Radin is in northeast Poland, border of Lithuania. When he hears that the Ger Rebbe has endorsed women learning Torah, he's appalled. And he tells his students, this is a man who's in his 80s. That was a fluke. But as the verse says, who's the one who desires life? Chafetz Chaim desires life. One who guards his tongue from speaking evil, his lips from guile. So that was fulfilled in him. Who was the one who desires life? So 80 years old, he was in his 80s, not 80 years old, in his 80s. This is a fluke. The average age was under 40. And so they put him in a wagon with mattresses and cushions, and they clippity-clap all the way to Ger. It's a 3-day journey. And he tells his students, I want you to recite Psalms every day. Say Tehillim, that the Ger Rebbe should change his opinion. And on the 3rd day when I arrive, I want you to fast, that the Ger Rebbe should change his opinion and not endorse women studying Torah. The opposition was based on what the Talmud teaches in Sota Daf Beis Amud Aleph. Kol malames bita Torah kila limda tiflas. Whoever teaches their daughter Torah, it's as if they taught them something wholly inappropriate. But let us not forget for a second that the Chafetz Chaim was the Ish HaEmet, the man of truth. And the Ger Rebbe said, this is what's necessary now. And the Chafetz Chaim writes an endorsement. He said, all the teaching girls today is tiflut, inappropriate things. Halavai, they would teach them Torah. She now has the Belzer Rebbe's endorsement, the Ger Rebbe's endorsement, the Chafetz Chaim, but it is not wall to wall. She walks in the street in Munkach Hasidim, throw stones at her and her students. And what does she do? She bends down, picks up the rocks, and no, she doesn't do that. So she has now Belz, Ger, Chafetz Chaim. Next stop is Vegas. Yeah. It's not wall to wall. Slonim is opposed to her. They're throwing rocks. She does the most brilliant thing in the world. Every stone that is thrown at her, she bends down, picks it up, places it in her palm, and caresses it. And she says, we'll take these slung stones and turn them into building bricks to build Beis Yaakov, a school for girls to study. It's brilliant what she's done. She's taken adversity and turned it into an opportunity. So she has endorsements, and now I'm just trying to show to you how Chanukah intensive the story is. She puts up that sign in her dressmaker shop that in honor of Chanukah there's going to be a sale. The mothers come, everybody's clucking away, looking in the mirror, and she thinks that outside that they're maybe finely attired, but inside are spiritual tatters. And she asks the following question. Whoever can answer this question will get a ribbon. Now, I'm a teacher. I'm coming to you now after teaching in 4 schools for many hours. If I would offer, whoever answers this question will get a ribbon, that would not even elicit a yuan. If you don't offer a cell phone, a mobile phone, driving lessons, a trip to the Gap, who even listened to it? You know, a ribbon? But the thing which drove Polish Jewry was grinding poverty. The average Polish Jew never tasted milchiks, never tasted dairy. All they had was a cup of water where a few drops of milk were dropped in to make it cloudy. A girl had one dress, weekday Shabbat. She got taller, a longer hem. Taller, a longer hem, and a longer hem, and a longer hem. You almost tell her age. like you count the rings of a tree. There was one pair of shoes, weekday Shabbat. The sole broke, a patch. The toe came out, a patch. The heel broke, a patch. Bulbous appendages, those were the shoes. Grinding poverty. Who wants a ribbon? I do. Like a forest, the hands went up. I do. Whatever can answer this question will get the ribbon. Who was Yehudit? And all of a sudden the woman go, absolute, total silence. And she repeats the question. Maybe they didn't hear. No one can answer. These are girls from Hasidic homes, but they never heard of Yehudit. Finally, one mother in a barely audible tone says, Yehudis? That sounds Jewish. Go ask the boys. So when you ask the boys, he said, you want to know about Christological figures, about the apostles? That we know. Jewish stuff we don't know. And then she said, well, would you like to learn? And they said, yes. I said, okay, come back to my dressmaker shop on the first night of Chanukah. There'll be latkes and all kinds of gute Sachen. On the first night of Chanukah, now let's create a little ambiance. It's a gibbous moon, and the moon is bouncing off. There was a fresh virgin snow with this fresh skin of snow, which is just powdered down. And in the gas lantern, everything looks blue, and there's this frosty sense in their chest from all the cold. They go to the dressmaker shop, and there's a Chanukah, there's a menorah in the window. And the window is foggy from the breath of the little girls. They come inside. By the way, I can take the tension no longer. This woman, her name was... Oh, come on, you ruined it. I thought I had... Okay, her name is Sarah Schneer. That is true. Now, Sarah Schneer is short, and I'm saying this for a purpose. Homely, extremely not attractive. I'll explain why I would say something like this. Not attractive. And she gets up to speak to Hasidische Meidlach, to Hasidic girls with braided pigtails, and she tells them the story of Hanukkah, which they've never heard before. And they're amazed by God, like fire is coming out of her mouth. What a raconteur. And she asks them, would you like to learn more? Yes. They come to my shop tomorrow. And the next day there's 12 girls. And so after 12 girls, it grows to 14. It's up to 19. When it gets to 24, she takes away the sewing machine and the bolts of fabric and the scissors. All that remains from the dressmaker shop is the blackboard, which formerly had been used for dimensions and shapes and measurements. And now it's used for block letters. Aleph, Beis, Ves, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Have you ever heard of it's disturbing that I can't remember names. I remember the name of his book. He wrote a book, Roman Vishniak. He wrote a book called A Vision Before Our Eyes. He was, good. Okay, so Roman Vishniak was the photographer that captured that interbellum period between the two world wars. You see pictures of Hasidim with a Strymel, which looks like a dead squirrel that's not still dead. And so he has a picture. I'm going to try and portray it as well as I can. It's a picture of a whole bunch of little girls sitting around a woman who's elderly with a tichel, headscarf pulled tightly over her head. She's holding a large tome, a large volume, and the girls are looking daisy-eyed all over the place. What's going on in this picture? The girls are illiterate, and she's reading to them Sena Arena because they cannot read themselves. They knew how to make blessings because they learned that from their mother. They knew how to pray because their mothers taught them, but they didn't know anything else. So she's telling them the story of Chanukah. Do you want to hear more? Yes. When she comes, like I said, we're up to 24. She converts the dressmaker shop, and the blackboard is used for the block letters. And it's from ground up. She's teaching them about Judaism. And the school is growing and growing and growing and growing. The situation was such that if you wanted your daughter to be a religious girl, you really had no other choice but to send her to Sarah I just read today, the 3 hardest things to say are, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, and Worcestershire sauce. And so, if you wanted your daughter to be religious, you had no other choice but to send her to Sarah in Krakow. Now, if you're coming from Paris, that means you're leaving a home with paneled walls and parquet floors and traveling all the way where the floors are dirt, the walls are flimsy curtains. It's like history. It's like history stood still for 500 years. Still gas lanterns. Everything is horse and buggy. On market day, there are PIGs walking through the marketplace. And if a girl would get admitted to a seminary, it was a simcha and a joy for the entire town. She got in. Now, they would leave, I'll portray to you, they would leave, let's say a girl from 400 miles away in Poland. She gets in, and the whole town would make a farewell party for her. And she boards the train, and it's a great chizuk, such encouragement that everyone has escorted her. I told my seminary students, you traveled far, far farther to go from New York or Los Angeles or Chicago or Cincinnati or Miami to come to seminary in Jerusalem than girls traveled to go to Sarah, but only geographically. When you left the plane, you were speaking in English. And on the plane, you were speaking in English. When you land, you speak, and that has never changed. But these girls, they leave, and they're very excited because they're ambassadors on behalf of their town. But as the train is continuing, chugga, 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 chugga. Believe it or not, they don't have a cell phone. And even if they would have, they have no phone in their home to call home to. And by the time they arrive in Krakow, the dam is about to break, and the tears are just about to torrent down, cascade down their cheeks. And as she was referred to, Mama Sarah is there at the train station to greet them. Very interestingly, Sarah was married and divorced at a young age, never had any children. And yet, the moniker we refer to her as is Mama Sarah. How interesting is that? And she took them under her wing. And girls innately somehow felt like they've come home. And they would sleep and study in the dressmaker shop. If you put 2 beds together, let's say 3 beds together, normally you'll sleep 3 people. They would sleep like this. So on on 3 beds, you could sleep 7 people. And there's something about the simplicity and sharing a piece of bread that worked. Even girls from wealthy families from Vienna, from Frankfurt, all participated. Now, one day, she's in this dressmaker shop in the tenements of Krakow, and a fellow breaks into her shop, Hasidic Yid, who is the wealthiest Jew in all of Krakow, holding a golden coin in the air. He said, I'm going to invest in your school. And she thinks he's out of his mind. No one invests in a school. What kind of investment is it? He said, you'll see, there'll be many schools. She was trying to hold together this one little school in her dressmaker shop. His name was Yaakov. The whole world thinks that Beis Yaakov is called Beis Yaakov because of Rashi. It says, Ko Tamar LeBeit Yaakov. And Rashi says, Elu HaNoshim. Beit Yaakov means to women. But I believe the reason was this fellow Yaakov gave her the seed money. And he said, what are you doing? He said, I've been all over the world. And I've seen how businesses come and go. But when you invest in spiritual matters, it's everlasting. I'll give you 2 examples. How are we doing? Go the full 3 hours? We're okay? Okay. 3 hours? Okay. I was just joking. I'm going to go 4 hours. Okay, so there was the Panovich Rav, one Shabbat afternoon, when he was still in Panovich, from which he got his moniker, he was walking home from shul, And accidentally on purpose, he bumped into Rabinovitz, who was the wealthiest Jew in Panovich. Rabinovitz had a flour mill. And as they're walking home, he says to Rabinovitz, this store of Shapiro's, could it be that it's no longer Shapiro's? He said, of course. Everyone knows that Shapiro sold it to Lifshitz. So now it's Lifshitz? No, actually Lifshitz, who bought it from Shapiro, is selling it to Newman. I don't get it. Is it Newman? Lifshitz? No. Newman bought it, but I understand the negotiations are underway ready to sell it to Levy. I'm all confused. Is it Levy? Is it Shapiro? Is it Newman? Is it Lifshitz? Well, I know that Levy is bidding on it, but it could very well be that Shapiro's going to get it. So I don't get it. Whose is it? Levy, Shapiro? So just that's the way it is in business. You wheel and deal. It's here today. It's gone tomorrow. Then as they were walking, he passed by Gluckala's Klois. Gluckala, you can probably understand, it's not such a popular name today. It was once a common Jewish woman's name. And Gluckala's Klois means Gluckala's shul. So the Panovich Rav said to Rabinovitz, who is going to buy Gluckala's Klois? No one's going to buy it. So who did she buy it from? She didn't buy it from anybody. So who's she going to sell? She's not selling it. You just told me you sell Shapiro to Newman to... No. That's material. In spiritual matters, once you buy it, it's yours. That's the way things go. It's an everlasting purchase. Everything you do in spirituality is forever. How does Rashi say? You can't take your possessions with you, but the mitzvot, they all go with you. One other story, there was a fellow named, they were building a shul years ago in North Tel Aviv. Mizrahi, that's his last name, was the largest tile importer in North Tel Aviv. And Tel Aviv port, actually it's South Tel Aviv. He was the largest importer. And the shul approached him and said, could you please donate for us 3 meters of sug beit, inferior, I never heard that expression in English, sug beit, inferior tiles. But then again, in many things in Israel, I never get it. They call mayonnaise amiti, genuine mayonnaise. Can you imagine? There's genuine, there's false, there's artificial, genuine chardal amiti. I don't know what, they have also, I guess in America they have grade A orange juice. Who would want to buy grade B? So anyway, so they say, just give us sug beit, give us your junky tiles. We need, for the washing area, some tiles. He said, I don't do that. I don't give away money to charity. That's not my thing. 3 months later, Mizrahi shows up with 15 meters of sug aleph aleph, the top of the line. They finished the completion of the synagogue, and then every single day after Shacharit, after the morning davening, this jalopy shows up. Do you know what a jalopy is? You know what it's called in Hebrew slang? Correct, taranta. He shows up in his taranta, in his jalopy. This man didn't know who he is. He puts his head down on the steering wheel. He stays there for about 7-8 minutes, and then he drives off. This is one morning, another morning, another. It's starting to get spooky. So they lay an ambush for him. And this is none other than Mizrahi. He said, what's going on here? He said, after you requested me to make the donation, Mas Hachnasa, Internal Revenue, got on my case. They took away everything. All I have left are the 15 meters I dedicated to a synagogue. If I don't see them in the morning, I can't continue. Because what you give to a synagogue, what you give that's spiritual, this is everlasting. So he said, I want to invest in you. And she thought he must be having hallucinations. But then again, this fellow did not make his fortune from hallucinations. And he made his money. And he was the seed money for the Beis Yaakov movement. And with this money, they built a 5-story building on the Vistula River, 10 Stanislaus Street. Wow, I remember that. 10 Stanislaus Street. And this is already in I believe 1931. And maybe I may be off as late as 1935. And there is a groundbreaking with thousands and thousands of Jews there, many dignitaries, officials, and even the fire department puts a few songs together for this occasion. And where's the hero of the day? Sarah Schneer. She's in the back row with her students, clutching a Sefer Tehillim. And everybody's praising each other, how we're doing this wonderful thing, and the school and girls are coming. And they built a school with 8 spacious classrooms on every floor. Because previously the school was in the tenements of Krakow. And they were adjacent to a tannery. Do you know what a tannery is? Okay, good for you. You certainly know a lot more than my students. Yeah, that's right. Verstunken, redolent, odorific, malodorous. So much so, the Gemara says in Gittin, that if a woman is married to a tanner, she's entitled to a divorce. You can't be expected to live with a man who's so odorific. Because dealing with hides is very malodorous. I'm not speaking from experience, but I trust the Gemara. And so in the winter, no problem. The windows are closed. But in the summer, Poland, by the way, is a country, we always associate Poland with the freezing temperatures. Poland is a country of extremes. Freezing cold in the winter and boiling hot in the summer. The summer, the windows are up. The verstunk it's impossible. So in the summer, the girls leave up to the meadows and the mountains of Poland, or the meadows, the hills of Poland. And you can picture the sound of music because these girls go there. I have in my book, I wrote about Sarah Schnerer. And you see the girls, every morning they would start off by doing calisthenics. And do the Beis Yaakov twist, I don't know, and there in the bosom of nature, she was able to teach the girls all kinds of aspects of Judaism that were declined to her in Krakow. Now, she realized that the situation was catastrophic. We have to make a network because without the girls, we can't save the Jewish people. And they had no interest in Judaism. They went to Polish public school. So she realized she had to make her core of students pedagogues and educators. She herself did not have such a background. She begged her parents to let her stay in school till 8th grade because she had to go out and make money and become a seamstress. And there were in Vienna and in Frankfurt, there were pedagogues of great ability, but there's no way she could bring them to the tenements of Poland. But once they were in the dacha, in the vacation area, that already was appealing. Judith Rosenbaum later became Rebbe in Grunberg. Grunberg, did I say that right? I think so. Grunfeld. Rebbe in Grunfeld. And at that Avigdor dinner, the Queen was there. She was there. They called her the Queen. Now I saw this woman when she was in her 80s. What a stature, what a presence. She was a very attractive woman. Now, another woman, if they wouldn't be so attractive themselves, might feel uncomfortable hiring such attractive people. That was not Sarah Schnerer. She had only one agenda, the betterment of the girls. So these experts in pedagogic skills taught pedagogic skills, and the girls had a mission. And you didn't matriculate from Beis Yaakov until you then went into the field for 6 months and taught. Now, going into the field means you could go to some little Polish town, and, well, she would go with the students. And when she would go, now she also had the same problems when she tried to recruit students. She would get students not just from Krakow, but from Warsaw, Lublin, Katowice. In Auschwitz, in Auschwitz, there were 800 Jewish girls. They were also entitled to Jewish education. So she would get on her wagon and clippity-clop out to go recruiting. She would take a student with her. And meanwhile, students that had not yet matriculated, they were 14 years old. They put up their hair and updos, put on high heels. They came into the classroom and it worked. And there was a core of students that wanted to create this idea of we're going to save the Jewish people. So whenever she would go to a new town to recruit, she would take along a student, and the whole way she would hone and teach a lesson. So Schneer would go into the shul, and there was men there often, and there was a public meeting for women and their daughters. There were often men there, and they had two reactions. Either they said, no, just a bunch of girls, or they began weeping, saying, she's speaking the truth. We should have sent our girls to a Jewish school, not that one existed. And she would point the finger of accusation. You're so busy with your business, you've neglected your daughters. And more girls would come. In the blink of the eye, historically, there's 38 schools across Poland. And it's growing and growing and growing and growing. Agudath Israel takes upon herself the responsibility of the finances. Now she has to create a curriculum. There's nothing that existed then. And she doesn't have I was going to say a mimeograph machine, which would have really dated me, a Xerox machine, which I think is also dating me. But she had to write everything by pen. And at night, they would sleep in the dressmaker shop. And she would be up, the light in her room would be on all night long as she's preparing the lessons. At 2:30 in the morning, she'd go through the shop, and plant a kiss on the girls' heads and take a wayward blanket and place it back on them. And then they're about to move into the new building. And there's excitement. There's a movement. And the girls would have to matriculate. They would she would take them to some little town, some little shtetla, and she would address the girls and then said, would you like to hear one of our students? That was almost a rhetorical question. They said, yes. The girl would present a masterful lesson, and then she would say, how would you like her to be your teacher? And there was a resounding yes. And she left the girl there. And Beis Yaakov had another toehold. But she would not leave town until she had proper accommodations for a schoolyard, for a schoolhouse, which could be just the basement somewhere, and accommodations for this girl, and also accommodations of shidduchim opportunities. And another school, and another school, and another school, and it spread like wildfire. Okay. Ooh. Gosh. Can you handle 5 more minutes without overheating? That wasn't a very resounding yes. Okay, one of you can. So listen quickly because we're going to finish. She's very excited. By the way, she would take the girls, this is in Krakow, she would take the girls to the cemetery every Erev Rosh Chodesh. In Krakow are many, many major spiritual luminaries. There's the Ramah, there's the Maharam, there are many great luminaries buried there. And the reason she took them there, she wanted them to understand that you are a link in the chain. You're part of this. And she had chesed put into their curriculum. And she didn't like teachers that were out-of-towners. In the summers, when it was a long Shabbat, she would have the teachers with them, singing songs with them, playing games. And she created a movement called Benos. It was a youth group, because she felt that what happens if I teach them during the day, and then Polish society destroys everything I've accomplished during the day. So she would have youth groups that would keep them. And there are pictures, I have in my book, pictures of, you see girls like this, little head, then a taller head, and little head, little head, little head. The head in the middle is the Beis Yaakov student. The girls were 9 years old, 10 years old, and the counselor is 14 years old. And it worked. And these pictures went into the purses, on the mantelpiece, and into the final journey to the crematoria. And my knowledge of the Holocaust is the greatest heroines of the Holocaust were students of Sarah Schnerer. In the bowels of the Holocaust, in the depths of the ghettos, they would encourage people to eat non-kosher food, because that's what halacha mandates. And they themselves refrained, although they never told anyone. Heroines to the very end. Okay, let's finish our story. So Beis Yaakov is going to open up a branch in Jerusalem, and she's very excited. I don't know if it's Jerusalem, it might have been Tel Aviv, but in Israel. And she's so excited she's going to travel. She's not feeling well, and they can't diagnose in Krakow, and she goes to Vienna, where they operate and discover that it's terminal cancer, about which they can do nothing. She comes back to Krakow, and she tells her students that you've just finished your finals, and now it's time to be prepared for the finals of life. And on Erev Shabbos, she beckons that her leichter, that her candles are brought to her, and she lights a match and kindles the flame, and she's peering at the candle, and her soul expires to the yeshiva, the great yeshiva Shalmala, to heaven. And that image of her always will stay in my head, of Sarah peering at the candle. She lit a flame, which is burning all over the world. As the Panovich Rav and Rav Aaron Kotler said, without her, there wouldn't be yeshivot, there wouldn't be kollalim, no matter where it is. A co-ed school in Minneapolis, or a day school in Johannesburg, without her, she made Jewish education a reality. We can't do it without the women. And thus, at that Sheva Brachot in the Mir Yeshiva, when the Chatzkel Sarna said, who is the greatest educator in the last 100 years, who never even opened the Gemara, he said, Chatzkel, This isn't funny. So the greatest educator was Sarah Schnerer. And all these great rabbis, to a man, nodded their head in agreement. We got it right. Okay, may her memory be a blessing for all of us, and we should take the message of Chanukah, how we can light a fire and spread it everywhere. And of course, the shamish is that you light the candle, and your light is never diminished. She'll have a very joyous and enlightening Chanukah. And I have some books there. I have a Hanukkah sale. I didn't bring many, but I think you'll find them enriching. I know I will.